Right now, somewhere in America, someone is opening an email they were not expecting. It is a Thursday morning, their coffee is still warm. The subject line says something about organizational restructuring. By the time they finish reading it, their keycard no longer works. In the first 7 months of 2026, more than 200,000 tech workers in the United States received some version of that email. Amazon cut 16,000. Oracle cut 21,000. Meta cut 8,000 and moved 7,000 more into new roles that did not exist a year ago. Block, the company Jack Dorsey built, went from 10,000 employees to 6,000 in a single announcement. The CEO's letter to shareholders was 4 words long in spirit. The core thesis is simple: artificial intelligence. That is the reason given in earnings calls, SEC filings, and press releases from companies posting record profits while handing out cardboard boxes. AI is now the most frequently cited reason for layoffs in the United States. It accounted for 13% of all job cuts in the first quarter of this year. By May, that number had climbed to 40%. 1,000 jobs are disappearing every single day, not in struggling companies, in thriving ones. Meta is spending between $125 and $145 billion on AI infrastructure this year. The same year it eliminated 10% of its workforce. The money did not vanish, it moved from paychecks to processors. And if you are watching this and you work in tech, or in customer service, or in writing, or in marketing, or in finance, or in any job that involves sitting at a desk and producing something a language model might learn to approximate, you already know what this feels like. That low hum of anxiety that never quite goes away. The question you do not ask your manager because you are afraid of the answer. Am I next? This feels new. It feels like something that has never happened before. A technology so fast, so sweeping, so fundamentally different that no historical comparison could possibly apply. But it is not new, not even close. 200 years ago, a group of English workers watched machines take over the only trade they had ever known. And 160 years after that, it happened again, not with the same drama, but with the same devastation. A city that had the best blue-collar jobs in the history of the American economy watched every single one of them disappear. If you have never heard what happened to that city, what you are about to hear will change the way you think about what is happening right now. Before we get to America, we need to start in England. Because the first time humans faced this exact fear, the response was not a LinkedIn post, it was violence. In March of 1811, a band of textile workers in Nottingham broke into a stocking manufacturer's workshop in the middle of the night. They were not there to steal, they were there to destroy. They took hammers to the knitting frames, the new machines that could produce fabric 100 times faster than human hands. When they were done, they signed their work with a name: General Ludd, Ned Ludd. A figure who probably never existed, a ghost leading an army of desperate men. To understand why they did it, you have to understand what they lost. For generations, textile work in England had been a cottage industry. A weaver worked at home, at his own pace, with his own tools. He was not rich, but he was free. He set his own hours. He controlled his own output. He was a craftsman with a skill that took years to learn, and that skill was his security. Then the factories came. The power looms. The spinning mules that used 1,000 spindles at once. And suddenly a factory owner with 10 machines could produce more cloth in a day than a village of weavers could produce in a month. The weavers were not just losing income. They were losing autonomy. The factory did not want their skill. It wanted their obedience. Show up at 6. Leave at 6. Do what the machine requires. And accept a fraction of what you used to earn. Within months, the attacks spread across northern England. Nottingham, Yorkshire, Lancashire. Masked men, operating at night, smashing the machines that were starving their families. These were not unskilled laborers lashing out blindly. They were highly trained craftsmen making a calculated choice. A wool cropper in Yorkshire spent years mastering 40-pound iron shears that could finish cloth with surgical precision. Then, a factory owner installed a shearing frame that let 2 unskilled workers do in a single day what that cropper did in a week. That cropper did not lose a job. He lost an identity. He lost the thing that made him who he was. And when he petitioned Parliament for relief and was ignored, and when he begged the factory owners to slow down and was laughed at, he picked up a hammer. Because it was the only tool he had left. The British government's response was extraordinary. They deployed more soldiers to fight the Luddites than they had sent to fight Napoleon in the Peninsular War. 14,000 troops across the Midlands and the North, occupying English towns as if they were foreign territory. Parliament passed a law making machine breaking a capital crime, punishable by death. In January of 1813, at the York Assizes, 12 Luddites were hanged, including George Mellor, a 22-year-old wool worker from Yorkshire who had become the movement's most visible leader. He was 22. He had spent his entire adult life watching his livelihood evaporate, and the punishment for fighting back was a rope. Mellor's execution was meant to be a message. It was. The machine breaking stopped. The machines did not. Within a generation, the cottage textile industry that had sustained English working families for centuries was gone. The Luddites had been right about one thing. The machines did take their jobs. They had been wrong about another. Smashing them did not help. And here is the part that rarely makes it into the history books. The textile industry did not collapse. It exploded. It grew into the engine of the British Empire. More cloth was produced. More wealth was created. More jobs eventually emerged. Different jobs, in different places, for different people. The economy recovered. The weavers of Nottingham did not. Now fast forward 160 years. Different country, different industry, same story. In 1950, Flint, Michigan was one of the most prosperous cities in the United States. General Motors, the largest corporation on earth at the time, had been born there. The company employed 80,000 people in and around the city. 80,000. That is not a workforce. That is an entire economy breathing through a single set of lungs. And those were not just jobs. They were the foundation of a life that millions of Americans believed they were entitled to by virtue of hard work. A man could walk out of high school on a Friday and start on the General Motors assembly line the following Monday. Within a few years, he would own a house. He would have health insurance that covered his family. His kids would go to decent schools. His wife would not have to work unless she wanted to. He would retire at 58 with a full pension, 30 years of service stamped on his record like a Medal of Honor. That was the deal. You gave General Motors your back, your hands, your knees, your hearing. And in return, General Motors gave you the American dream, not the version you had to chase. The version that was waiting for you at the end of the line. The unions made sure of it. The United Auto Workers, under Walter Reuther and his successors, had fought for decades to build that arrangement. Annual 3% raises, cost of living adjustments with no cap, full pensions after 30 years, health coverage that followed you into retirement. By 1970, a GM assembly worker in Flint was earning the equivalent of $65,000 a year in today's money, with benefits that white-collar professionals envied. It was, by most measures, the best blue-collar job in the history of the American economy. People came from all over the country for those jobs. From Appalachia, From the deep south, from small towns where the best you could hope for was seasonal farm work or a shift at the local mill. They heard that General Motors was hiring, and they drove north with everything they owned in the back of a truck, and within a year, they had more money and more stability than anyone in their family had ever known. Flint was not just a company town, it was proof that the system worked. That if you showed up and did the work, America would keep its end of the bargain. Nobody told those workers it was temporary. The first blow came from overseas. The oil crisis of 1973 sent gasoline prices through the roof, and suddenly Americans wanted small, fuel-efficient cars. The kind that Toyota and Datsun and Honda had been building for years. The kind that Detroit had no idea how to make. Japanese imports flooded the market. By 1980, foreign automakers had captured nearly 30% of American car sales, up from almost nothing a decade earlier. The second blow came from Washington. The Federal Reserve, fighting double-digit inflation, raised interest rates to levels not seen before or since. Car loans became unaffordable. Showrooms emptied. Two back-to-back recessions, in 1980 and then again in 1981, hit the auto industry like consecutive freight trains. But the third blow was the one that changed everything, and it came from inside the factory. General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler looked at their losses. They looked at their foreign competitors. And they made a calculation that would reshape the American economy for generations. They would automate. They would replace human hands with robotic arms. They would cut labor costs by cutting labor. The numbers are staggering. Ford's hourly workforce shrank by 46% between 1978 and 1982. That is roughly 100,000 people in 4 years. Chrysler laid off a third of its entire workforce and shuttered 12 factories. The company avoided total bankruptcy only through a federal bailout and the desperate leadership of Lee Iacocca. And in Flint, the city that had built General Motors, the company began closing plant after plant after plant. There is a moment in a 1980 episode of Bill Moyer's Journal that stops you cold. A laid-off auto worker in Detroit looks into the camera and says something that could have been recorded this morning. "I figure it is too much automation here." That is why so many people are out on the street now, because they got machines doing everything. Everybody used to come to Detroit. We will all get a job in an auto factory. Now the people, even they, do not have a job in an auto factory. There is not very much to look forward to anymore. He was not an economist. He was not a policy analyst. He was a man who had moved to Michigan because someone told him there would be work. And now there was no work. And the machines were still running. By 1986, General Motors had closed 11 plants in Flint. 30,000 jobs. Gone. Not restructured. Not reassigned. Gone. The assembly lines that had employed 3 generations of families went silent, and nothing replaced them. A filmmaker named Michael Moore, whose own father had spent his life on those assembly lines, came home to Flint and documented what he found. Families being evicted from their homes. Workers selling blood plasma for grocery money. The sheriff's department carrying out so many evictions they could barely keep up. A woman named Sabrina Thompson, filmed on camera as a deputy, removed her family's belongings and placed them on the curb. The city tried to reinvent itself. They built a Hyatt Regency hotel. They built a festival marketplace, modeled on the ones that had revitalized Boston and Baltimore. They spent $100 million on an automotive theme park called Auto World. The theme park closed within 6 months. The hotel went bankrupt. The marketplace sat empty, waiting for shoppers who never came. And the people of Flint, the people who had given their bodies to the assembly line and trusted that the deal would hold, discovered something that no one had prepared them for. The deal was not a contract, it was an arrangement. And arrangements can be rearranged. Flint's GM workforce went from 80,000 in 1978 to 23,000 by 1990. Across the entire industry, UAW membership at the big three automakers dropped from 650,000 to 135,000 over 3 decades. The city of Detroit lost 300,000 residents in the 1970s alone. Its population fell from 1.85 million in 1950 to under 700,000 by 2010. In 2013, Detroit filed for the largest municipal bankruptcy in American history. They called it the Rust Belt. The name was not a metaphor. It was a description. Drive through Flint, or Detroit, or Cleveland, or Youngstown in the late 1980s, and you would see it. Factories the size of aircraft carriers standing empty, their windows shattered, their parking lots cracked and overgrown. Houses that had sheltered auto worker families for decades, sitting vacant with plywood over the doors. Entire commercial strips where every storefront was dark. A man who had worked at the Buick plant for 23 years told a reporter in 1987, "I did everything they asked. I showed up every day. I never missed a shift. And one morning they told me the plant was closing, and that was that. 23 years, and I got a handshake in 2 weeks." The government offered retraining. That became the word of the decade. Retrain. As if a 50-year-old man who had spent his entire career on an assembly line could sit in a community college classroom and become a computer programmer. Some did. Most did not. The programs were underfunded, poorly designed, and aimed at jobs that often did not exist in the communities where the displaced workers actually lived. You could retrain to become a medical technician, but the nearest hospital was 40 miles away, and you could not afford to move because your house was worth less than you owed on it. But here is the part of the story that complicates everything. The machines that replaced those workers did not destroy the auto industry. They saved it. Productivity soared. Quality improved. Costs came down. General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler survived. American auto manufacturing recovered, eventually. The companies lived, the workers did not. Or rather, the workers survived, but the lives they had built, the communities they had raised families in, the version of America they had been promised, that did not survive. The retraining programs mostly retrained people for jobs that did not exist. The government gave speeches about the future while the present was burning. The economists said the market would correct itself, and eventually it did. Decades later, long after the people who needed the correction had already lost everything. Now look at what is happening today, and start counting the parallels. In 1980, auto companies said they needed to automate to stay competitive with Japanese imports. In 2026, tech companies say they need AI to stay competitive with each other. In 1980, General Motors posted record profits the same year it closed 11 plants in Flint. In 2026, Meta is spending up to $145 billion on AI infrastructure the same year it cut 10% of its workforce. In 1980, corporate executives described automation as an inevitable evolution. In 2026, CEOs describe AI as existential. In both cases, the word used most often was not strategy, it was survival. In both eras, the technology was real, the productivity gains were real, and the displacement was real. In both eras, the people most affected were the ones least prepared. In 1980, it was assembly line workers without college degrees. In 2026, it is mid-career knowledge workers who assumed their education would protect them. In both eras, there was a convenient ambiguity about cause and effect. In the 1980s, auto companies blamed Japanese competition when automation was doing most of the cutting. They pointed overseas so nobody would look at the factory floor. In 2026, analysts have coined a term for the same phenomenon. They call it AI washing. Companies citing AI as the reason for layoffs they would have made anyway for financial reasons. Overhiring during the pandemic. Bloated management structures. Slowing revenue growth. These are real problems. But AI makes for a better press release than we grew too fast, and now we are correcting. Even OpenAI's own CEO has acknowledged it. There is some AI washing, Sam Altman told an audience in India, where people are blaming AI for layoffs that they would otherwise do. And in both eras, the displaced workers heard the same script. This is not personal. This is the future. The jobs will come back, just different. You need to adapt. The language of progress has always been remarkably consistent. It is always forward-looking, always optimistic, and always spoken by someone whose job is not the one disappearing. But the differences matter too, and pretending everything is identical is just as intellectually lazy as pretending nothing compares. The auto workers of Flint had one skill set tied to one industry in one geographic region. When the plants closed, there was nowhere to go. The tech workers of 2026 are dispersed across every city, every sector, every income bracket. The displacement is wider but also more diffuse. There is no single Flint this time. There are 10,000 smaller Flints, invisible because no one city is collapsing dramatically enough to make the evening news. The speed is profoundly different. Factory automation in the auto industry unfolded over 2 decades. There was time, however inadequate, for communities to see it coming. A plant would announce it was reducing shifts 6 months before the layoffs. Families had time to plan, even if the plans were bad ones. AI adoption is measured in fiscal quarters. ChatGPT launched in November 2022. By 2024, companies were restructuring around it. By 2026, entire departments were gone. That is not a transition. That is a trap door. A company can decide on a Tuesday that it needs fewer people, and by Thursday, those people are updating their resumes. The 1980s gave communities time to decline gradually, which was a terrible kind of mercy. AI is not offering even that. And perhaps the most important difference of all, in 1980, machines replaced hands. In 2026, AI is replacing judgment. It is replacing the thing that white-collar workers believed made them irreplaceable. Not their physical strength, their thinking. That is a different kind of wound. When a machine took your job in a factory, you could tell yourself you were more than your hands. When an algorithm takes your job at a desk, what do you tell yourself? That you are more than your mind? So where does this leave us? 2 positions, both supported by evidence, both held with conviction, both certain the other side is missing the point. One side says this: a man who lost his factory job in Flint in 1982 and spent 3 decades watching his city decay puts it bluntly. They told us the same thing they're telling you now. They said the jobs would come back different. They said retrain. They said adapt. I retrained for a job that did not exist. I adapted to making half of what I used to make. And my city never recovered. Not in 10 years, not in 20, not in 40. The people telling you this time is different are the same kind of people who told us the same thing. They were wrong then. Ask me how I know. A labor historian looks at the data and says the pattern is structural. Every time a major technology displaces workers at scale, the economy eventually adjusts. But eventually can mean a generation. The textile workers, displaced by the power loom in the 1810s, saw their children benefit from industrialization, but they themselves died poor. The auto workers displaced by robots in the 1980s saw the economy recover, but their communities never did. The gains go to capital, the losses go to labor. Every single time. The other side says this. A startup founder in San Francisco who has built 3 companies in the last decade and is now building her 4th around AI tools pushes back. I understand the fear, but look at the actual data. IBM is tripling its entry-level hiring this year because they realize that cutting all the humans hollows out the pipeline. Companies that went all in on automation in the 1990s lost their institutional knowledge within 5 years. We know this. We have the case studies. AI is creating entirely new categories of work that did not exist 18 months ago. The question is not whether jobs will disappear. Some will. The question is whether we will build the bridge between the old jobs and the new ones. And unlike 1980, we have actually seen what happens when you do not build that bridge. We have Flint. We have Detroit. We have the entire Rust Belt as a warning. We know what failure looks like. That is an advantage the auto workers never had. An economist adds the numbers. The World Economic Forum projects that AI and automation will displace 92 million jobs globally by 2030. That is the number everyone cites. What they leave out is the second number. The same report projects 170 million new jobs in the same period, a net gain of 78 million. More jobs, not fewer. But the man in Flint would tell you that net gains are a cold comfort when the net gain happens in a different city, in a different industry, requiring a different skill set, and you are 53 years old with a mortgage you cannot sell your way out of. The issue is not the total number of jobs. It is the transition. It is the gap between the job that disappears on Tuesday and the job that emerges 2 years later in a different zip code. That gap is where lives break. And in the 1980s, that gap swallowed entire cities. Both sides. Both real. Both backed by data and history, and the kind of conviction that comes from having something at stake. Here is what I keep coming back to. In 1978, a man in Flint, Michigan could walk out of high school and into a job that would give him a house, a pension, and a life that most people in the world would consider extraordinary. By 1988, that job was gone. The factory was silent, the house was in foreclosure, and the pension was a promise nobody intended to keep. That man is in his late 60s or 70s now. He is sitting in a living room somewhere, watching the news, watching tech workers carry cardboard boxes past security guards. And he recognizes what he is seeing. Not because he read about it, because he lived it. And somewhere across the country, a 32-year-old software engineer is sitting in her apartment, refreshing her inbox, waiting for a response to the 47th application she has submitted this month. She has a degree from a good university. She has 8 years of experience. She did everything right. And she is beginning to understand something that nobody told her when she was choosing her major. That a skill set is not a safety net. That experience is not the same thing as job security. That the deal she thought she had, the one where you work hard and stay current and keep learning and everything works out, that deal can be rearranged too. These two people have never met. They live in different cities and different generations in different Americas. But they are living the same story. And neither of them knows how it ends. In 1980, America watched its factory towns collapse and decided that was the price of progress. It was an acceptable loss. The market would adjust. The people would adapt. Some of them did. A lot of them did not. In 2026, something else is collapsing. Something harder to photograph than an empty factory floor, but no less real. Careers that took a decade to build are dissolving in a fiscal quarter. Skills that commanded 6-figure salaries 18 months ago are being measured against a subscription that costs $20 a month. And the people in the middle of it, the ones refreshing their inboxes and rehearsing answers for interviews that never come, they are discovering the same thing the auto workers of Flint discovered 40 years ago. That being good at your job is not the same thing as being safe. That loyalty to a company is a one-way street. That the economy does not owe you the life it promised you, no matter how many years you put in. A man in Flint could have told them that. But nobody asked. The last time this happened, we did not have a plan. We had retraining programs that trained people for jobs that had already moved overseas. We had politicians who said the word innovation like it was a form of prayer. We had economists who promised the market would self-correct. And the market did self-correct 40 years later, by which time the people who needed the correction had either left or been buried. 45 years separate those two moments, long enough for a generation to be born, grow up, build careers, and start asking the same questions their parents asked. Short enough that the people who lived through the first one are still alive to watch the second one unfold. And what they are watching feels, to them, less like history rhyming and more like history stuttering. The same sentence, repeated. The same promise, broken. The same shrug. So here is the question. And I am not going to answer it. Because the answer is yours. Are we going to do the same thing again? The people versus two sides, one story. You decide.